Welcome to the Medical Muse podcast. Discover the humanistic aspects of physicians and scientists as they describe their career paths and any advice they have for current medical students. Each episode, we interview a new guest and discuss the future of the field. This is the Medical Muse.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Medical Muse podcast. This episode is going to be a little bit different. It will actually feature two doctors today. Today, we're pleased to have Dr. Ian Singer and Dr. Athena Chatzigiannidis, the chair and the vice chair of American College of Osteopathic Family Physicians, here with us today. Dr. Singer serves as one of the chief residents of the Family Medicine Residency at Broward Health, and Dr. Chatzigiannidis is a second-year resident at Cherokee Nation Family Medicine at Oklahoma State. We're excited to speak with them today, and we welcome them to the show. Thank you guys for joining us. Welcome to the Medical Muse podcast.
Daniel, Raj, thank you for having us. We're excited.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. Start off, tell us a little bit about yourselves and where did you grow up and where are you from? Dr. Chatzigiannidis, if you'd like to start first, then Dr. Singer.
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently a second-year family medicine resident in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, just like Daniel mentioned. I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, but moved to the States when I was just 3 years old. And so I kind of grew up in a really small town called Jinx, Oklahoma, which is right outside of Tulsa. I went to the University of Oklahoma for undergrad, and then I went to Oklahoma State University in Tulsa, my hometown, for medical school. And so now I'm at a satellite campus of Oklahoma State University out here in Tahlequah.
Okay, so you've kind of stayed local for most of your life then?
I tried to. I don't have a ton of family in the United States, so it's really important to me to stick nearby them.
Okay, are you a citizen?
I am. So I got my citizenship in 2004. I was young enough that I kind of got grandfathered in when my parents did all of their citizenship testing. So.
Oh, cool. That could make it a little bit easier, I guess, when you're applying to residencies and medical schools and stuff like that sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
How about you, Dr. Singer?
So like Athena being local to Oklahoma, I am local to South Florida. So born in Miami. I was raised in Coral Springs in Fort Lauderdale. I did my first 2 years of undergrad at Emory University in Atlanta, transferred to the University of Miami because I wanted a little more fun of a college experience, and our football team was doing well in the early 2000s. I then went to law school at St. Thomas University School of Law, which is located in Miami Gardens, small law school in the North Miami area. And then I earned my DO at Nova Southeastern University. Currently am a third-year family medicine resident at Broward Health in Fort Lauderdale. And like you had mentioned in the intro, Daniel, I serve as chair of the ACOFP Resident Council, and Athena is my right-hand person as my vice chair of the Resident Council.
And that's wonderful. And did you guys meet through ACOFP?
We did. So yeah, I guess it's been about a year. Athena and I have become acquainted with each other. It's actually all been virtual.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's been a year, and I feel like I know Ian really well, but we've never actually had an opportunity to meet in person. So.
Oh, that's funny.
These are the COVID realities.
Yeah.
And what interested both of you guys in joining ACOFP?
So for me, I really enjoy family medicine. I'm very proud to be a DO. So I have been a member of ACOFP since I was a student, and I would just receive the emails, etc. And then the email for resident council applications came through during my first year of residency. This was right before the pandemic hit, and I figured, oh, what a neat way to be involved more so with the organization. And I applied for one of their 12 nationwide positions and was fortunately accepted, which was wonderful. And it's been really neat for me. I would say the most interesting aspect of being on the resident council has been the opportunity to meet and interact with people like Athena, who are very passionate, not only about family medicine, but also about being DOs and advancing the field and learning about their experiences and their thoughts and their values about medicine and how it should be practiced. So that's how I happened my way into ACOFP.
So I kind of had a similar experience where when I came into medical school, I knew that I wanted to do primary care, and ACOFP is a free organization for students to join. And so that's kind of where I got started. Was the club fair rolled around, that sign had a big old free up on top, and I said, yeah, sign me up. And then once I got involved, my second year medical student mentor was the president of ACOFP on our local chapter the year before me. And so she really encouraged me to get involved with leadership. So I served as a local chapter officer within the organization and got to go to the national convention, where I made a whole bunch of like nationwide friends in the ACOFP and kind of started to build like what I consider to be my osteopathic family. Coming from overseas, I don't have a ton of like role models within my family here in the States that really can direct me or guide me in higher education here. Obviously, my parents went to university overseas, and it was an entirely different experience. So I've really leaned on and relied heavily on my ACOFP family to help get me through a lot of the challenges that you have to overcome trying to get from medical school to residency to now looking for a job even. Because the first time that I signed up for my first federal loan, I was like, I don't even know how to do this. And so just having people you can bounce those types of questions off of has been really useful for me. But also, it's truly a community that is unmatched in any other organization that I've been in. And so that's kind of what guided me to want to continue with ACOFP as I moved on through medical school and into residency. My, I think, third or fourth year of medical school, I served as the ACOFP student governor on the board of governors with them, which prompted me to be more interested in the advocacy side of the organization and what exactly ACOFP does for its members. And I knew coming into residency that I wanted to stay involved with leadership and advocacy within the organization. And the next natural progression of that would be to get involved with the resident council. And so I applied and was fortunate enough to be selected, and then even more fortunate to get to serve as Dr. Singer's vice chair this year. So it's been a great year.
That's wonderful.
So it sounds like you kind of use the organization as a source of mentors based on what you said. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think both a source of mentors and truly, it sounds really cheesy, and ACOFP came up with a slogan when I was on the board, for family, by family. And honestly, I feel like the physicians that I've met through the ACOFP really are like a family for me. I get Christmas cards from them, I get birth announcements, and these are just physicians from across the United States. Some of them are like peers that are also in residency. Some of them are physicians that have been in practice 20, 40 years. And so it's been really unique in that I don't come to the table in ACOFP and feel like I'm less than. I feel like I have a valuable voice and that they want to hear what contributions I have to the organization, but also want to contribute to my success in my career and within the organization.
That's really cool that you both are a part of such a community where you can kind of share those ideas about your unique experiences, where you are in Oklahoma, where he is in Florida, and kind of exchange ideas to push forward the field. I think that's really, really cool. What motivated you guys to go into family medicine? Were you guys considering other specialties at the time? What were some of the unique aspects of family medicine that really told you, hey, this is for me, like, this is what I want to do?
Heading into medical school, I guess I told you, as you can tell by my background, non-traditional. I had a JD, I practiced law for a bit. I knew I just wanted to be a doctor first and foremost. As time wore on, throughout the first and second year, I was sort of zeroing in on internal medicine, neurology, and family medicine. And as I moved into the clinical rotation aspect of our medical education, I really started to notice I felt very energized during my family medicine rotations, both in my inpatient family medicine month as well as my outpatient family medicine month, the outpatient family medicine rotation. So incidentally, my rotations were at Broward Health, which is where I'm a resident. So my inpatient family medicine was at Broward Health, and my outpatient was at Nova Southeastern University. Daniel completed that rotation, so he can attest. It's a very fulfilling, robust rotation where you're really taught super well. And for me, I really enjoyed seeing how the residents and the attendings interacted with one another. And really what impacted me the most was seeing the patients who were impacted by the residents, the patients who had been following, for example, the third year residents Many of their patients had been seeing them since early in their first year of residency and seeing the human connections that had been established. And for me, that was very unique. And it truly gave me a lot of strength. And for me, that is ultimately why I ended up choosing family medicine. It actually became a no-brainer decision for me after completing those 2 rotations.
You learned from the best, Dr. DeGaetano. So
I did, who you guys had on the podcast.
Yep. And how about you?
I think for me, I say that I always wanted to do primary care, and that's for the most part true, but everything calls to you along your journey, whether it's undergrad or med school. At some point you start thinking, maybe I should be a nephrologist, or maybe I should be, and so you get these thoughts. But the one that kind of stuck persistently was my interest in like full spectrum care. And so the specialties that called to me the most while I was trying to decide where I was going to apply for residency were actually obstetrics and pediatrics. And I loved both of those areas, but I didn't want to just deliver babies all day and then not get any continuation of care after that, not get to see those babies. And I didn't want to just see kiddos and have them age out of my care and then not be able to follow them when they turn 18 or when they turn 21. And so for me, family medicine was kind of the way to cheat the system and say, I'm going to see these patients from the time that they're born until the end of my career, hopefully. And so there wasn't really a question of, should I second guess myself and give up something that I love, when family medicine was there and had afforded me the opportunity to kind of do it all. The other part of that is that I had the most amazing family medicine physician growing up. And so I switched from a pediatrician to a family medicine doctor that my parents were seeing when I was about 6 years old. Again, my family didn't have a ton of contacts in the United States. And so he was kind of a great role model for me as a kid. And so I remember getting really excited to go to my well child checks as a kid. And I'd bring in my soccer trophies. When I got to high school, I brought like my sheep showing ribbon because I showed livestock in high school. And that was like something that I showed my doctor and was like, this is what I'm doing in my life. When I must have been like a senior in high school, I started babysitting for his kids. When I applied to medical school, he wrote my letter of recommendation for me. I did some shadowing with both him and his wife, who is a pediatrician here in town. And so for me, he even texts me probably 2 or 3 times a year, and he says, hey, how's the residency going? Or, hey, is there anything that I can help you with? And so having that relationship with my family medicine doctor growing up, there wasn't another specialty that I could think of that you have the continuation of care that you could have that kind of relationship with your patients. And so I feel very fortunate. And it was kind of mind blowing to me when I started med school and my classmates didn't have a similar experience with their own doctors. And so I kind of hope to be one of those doctors for somebody down the road.
Dr. Singer, I have to ask, so law school and medical school are probably 2 of the most rigorous, different things a person can tackle academically. Can you compare and contrast the feelings that you had and the type of work that you had to do in both, and which one did you think was more challenging?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. The answer is a bit multi-layered. Just to give a little context, I went to law school straight out of college, so I was 22 years old. Brash, cocky, not a care in the world. So starting law school, spiked hair, tight t-shirt, I got this. That being said, I felt very confident going into law school, but law school was very challenging. Now, curriculum-wise, law school is different than medical school in how specifically the classroom lectures are taught. In law school, most law schools, I assume they still do. It's not like I went to law school forever ago. Go by what's called the Socratic Method. That's how you're taught. So rather than reading a textbook or a PowerPoint slide like we did in medical school and like you gentlemen do in medical school, we have what's called a case book, and it's a thick textbook for each of the different classes. And there's no like contracts. This is the definition of a contract. This is the definition of a crime. It is cases. Jones versus State, Johnson versus Johnson, whatever it is. And you learn through reading those cases. So every day and every night you were reading, I remember reading let me tell you guys something. I never read a book, I don't think, in my entire life until I went to law school. I would get the Cliff Notes to the Cliff Notes if that's what it took for me to get, you know, my papers done in college and high school and middle school. I mean, law school is all about reading, but nonetheless, you would really have to read, and you would have to know the ins and outs of every single case. And the reason why that would happen is you would be sitting in a class, your class lecture hall, and attendance is, well, for me, it was mandatory by the American Bar Association. So your class is filled with around 80 people. You have to be there every day. And the professor will go down the roster randomly and will pick one person, okay? And they will start going back and forth with you in front of all 80 other people in the class about that case that you studied. So you better know that thing cold. If you don't, for example, you have the gunners in the other side of the room who are frantically raising their hand, can't wait to answer the questions. I had one professor, she was fantastic, but if you couldn't answer like more than 2 questions, she would kick you out of the classroom. Pretty intense, but it forces you to be prepared. Now, how the Socratic method works is you're asked a question based on the case, you answer the question, they follow up with another question. And they just keep going and go. A really talented professor will keep going and going. And the questions they ask are designed to make you think, and also your classmates who are listening on how to think about a case or a particular subject. And sometimes the questions will just get more and more complicated to the point where they know you have no chance in answering it right, okay? And then once they move on to the next student, you're like, oh my God, thank God. So that's pretty much how law school goes all 3 years. Now there are obviously some special classes, like you can learn how to do like litigation, things of that sort, but really that's the bulk of the education. And then as we know, med school, though I know things differ from school to school, at least for me at NSU, first year was very science heavy, straight up, a lot of it straight up memorization. There were some things you had to understand in terms of like physiology, mechanisms, etc. The second year, we moved into systems, but again, much more memorization based, I would say, whereas law school required a little more, I would actually say a lot more critical thinking. So those would be the 2 differences. Now, if everybody asked me, what do I feel like was more difficult, right? So, you know, it's hard for me to say. I started medical school, I think by the time I started, I was 32 or 33, and I knew I just gave up everything to do it. So I also had this like, I had a strong sense of urgency that this was like kind of a do or die situation. I needed to do well in medical school. So I put a lot of pressure on myself. For me, medical school was more difficult than law school. I just felt like for me, memorizing things, like the fire hydrant analogy that everybody uses about medical school, that, you know, the fire hydrant's busted open and like, you're just trying to get like a drop of water, like as this thing just keeps shooting water out. Like that's literally how it felt to me. You know, we would have like 2 to 3 to 4 tests per week. I was living test to test, utterly exhausting. That being said, learned a lot in both. And I'm grateful to have gone through both experiences. Very long answer.
That's a great answer. I was quite intrigued when you were talking about the Socratic method and how they would put you on the spot like that. Did those types of experiences in law school help you through? I feel like that would help you tremendously with the pressures of medical school. Could you maybe elaborate on that a little bit? Yeah.
So actually, where you can see the relationship is when you get to, as you gentlemen know, as medical students in your clinical years, when you get to your 3rd year of medical school is where you're introduced to the concept of rounding. Many times on rounds, depending on the mood of the residents you're with, as well as the attending, you can do, essentially it's a form of Socratic method, I would say. You need to, as a medical student, you really need to know your patients well that you're following, and the attending, he or she can start asking you questions about that patient. If you're doing well and you're really feeling yourself, they'll ask you a more complicated question about that patient. And keep going and going and go on and so forth. So a really talented attending physician can really, like a talented law professor, can really bring out the best of you. And using that sort of back and forth question and answer dialogue rather than just dictating information out to you. The interaction is invaluable. And I would say that's where there's a lot of overlap between legal and medical education, is in that aspect.
That's really cool. And did you feel like did you have some plan, long-term plan with, okay, I wanted this combination of law and medicine for, this particular purpose? I mean, was there the interface of those two things? Does that kind of lead into any sort of...
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And it was this is kind of me making my, I always say we all have a different journey, right? For some people, they know they want to be a doctor. They know they need to study hard in college. They got to do well in the MCAT. They start medical school. For me, it was, I started out as pre-med, wasn't taking it seriously, was getting C's in general chemistry and organic chemistry. I was like, all right, I guess med school is not for me. What's the next best thing to do? Oh, cool. Political science is kind of interesting. Let me do that. Get a bachelor's in political science. Oh, what can I do with this? Oh, I'll go to law school. So really it was just kind of living moment to moment for me. This wasn't part of some master plan like some other doctor lawyers do have. Some do intend to get both degrees. For me, it was purely living in the moment, baby, as they say, and just going one day at a time. And my journey was long and winding, but I'm so happy where I'm at.
Okay, thanks. So now I was just kind of wondering, back to the residency discussion, what are some of your favorite things about the residency that you guys are in? It can be specifically family medicine or specifically your program, or just residency in general that's different from med school. Can you guys talk about that for us?
So I think one of my favorite parts about my residency is the size and the people of the residency here. And so I am in a smaller residency program. When I joined the residency, we were 3 classes of 4, so 12 total residents. And I think we had one that was off cycle. So we were actually only 11 residents when I joined. And so we knew each other all very, very well. And before I came to residency here, I think I'd spent 5.5 months. And so I came into this residency feeling like, okay, I get to go spend another 3 years with my friends that I knew from med school. And so for me, they've been an exceptional community. I'm about an hour and 15 minutes away from family. And so we go out and we do intern family dinner once a month. We're not interns anymore, but we still call it intern family dinner. And we bring our spouses, children, and just try to spend some time outside of residency being a little bit of a community. And so that's been probably my favorite part of residency out here. All of our attendings are very invested in teaching. And now that we have the satellite med school campus out here, which opened the year that I started residency out here, we also have lots of opportunities to get involved with the medical students. And so there are a couple of medical students out here on the campus that will, they all have my phone number. And so they'll text me and ask me questions because we're right here and available. There are only 2 residency programs in Tahlequah. One of them is our family medicine program. And then there's one associated with the city hospital. It's internal medicine. And so I try to make myself available to the students. We help out with table training for their own MEM. We do some clinical skills stuff with them. And so I didn't really think coming into med school that I would have any interest at all in academia. And here I am, like really enjoying hanging out with med students and teaching med students. I'm our student coordinator for the residency here. And so every time that we have students rotate through, I kind of help organize their rotations for them as well. And so I just feel like this has really been a unique community to be involved with. The other thing that's really unique to my residency is that I work for the hospital system that is the largest tribally affiliated hospital system in the nation. So I work at Cherokee Nation. All of my patients are tribal beneficiaries. They're not all Cherokee Nation citizens. But because of that, the patient population that I have is very unique. And so I see lots of very unique pathologies. And as a result, I get an opportunity to be involved in taking care of patients that are really sick and really feeling like the work that I'm doing, even now as a resident, is making a difference and an impact, not only on my patients' lives, but also on this community. And so with COVID happening this year, one of the things that we've been very cautious about is losing Native Cherokee speakers. And so we only have a few Cherokee Nation elders that still speak Cherokee fluently. And so we have worked tremendously to protect our Native speakers here in the area. And so we've been really involved with like frontline COVID efforts as well. And so there's been just, it seems like every day there's something new about my program that I fall in love with. And there's so many different aspects that it'd be really difficult to just pick one.
Dr. Singer?
I love hearing Athena's like stuff. It always pumps me up because like, I don't know, residency, like for Athena, for me, residency has been an amazing experience. So I get energized when I hear her talking about what she loves doing and why she loves doing it. Certainly the camaraderie is awesome. Sometimes, especially like for us at Broward Health, we're a major duty public hospital system, one of the 10 largest in the country. When our inpatient service is bustling and busy and loaded with patients, and you're in the trenches with your co-residents managing some very sick patients, and then when nighttime comes or later, you can go get dinner and relax and talk about the cases and just having that bond that you've helped each other through these very difficult, strenuous times at work. Like Athena, I particularly enjoyed teaching as well. Daniel, I remember multiple days working with you as my medical student. I also have been fortunate enough to be an adjunct faculty instructor teaching the medical jurisprudence component of the business of medicine course that's taught to the second year med students at NSU. So I derived a lot of enjoyment from teaching. And then just about my program in general, certainly the inpatient training is very intense, which for me, even though I have minimal interest in practicing hospital medicine, it's a great place to learn medicine. Like Athena says, you can learn from these very special patient populations who have very advanced pathologies that, yeah, you read about it in first aid, but you don't never expect to see it. And then you see it and you're like, oh my God, that's what that is. Like unbelievable. And then my outpatient training is on a medical school campus. So I get a very academically oriented environment. And then with regards to my program director, he gives us a lot of flexibility to pursue interests. So something like doing the ACOFP Resident Council, which it is a time commitment, allowed to pursue that, doing things like the teaching and doing unique rotations. Like I did an elective rotation in hospital administration. I spent a month with the chief medical officer of Broward Health. So it's been, for me, residency has been about soaking up as many different experiences as I can. And I certainly feel like at least so far, I still have 6 months left, but I've had no regrets so far about how I've approached it.
That's really cool. And well, actually, go ahead, Dan.
Can you explain the difference in responsibilities and just like overall life from maybe like starting with fourth year of medical school to first year of residency? And I would imagine that one kind of overlaps regardless of your specialty. But then as you get into your second year, maybe it changes a little bit. But can you kind of compare the different years and the responsibilities and how you felt internally and stuff like that for me, for us?
How I look at the medical school to residency transition, I would say third year of medical school is really about learning the medicine, finding the specialty you like. Obviously, board exams are a part of it as well. Learning the growth learning curve is high. Fourth year, I feel like there's a little bit of stagnation because you're applying for residencies, you're stressed out or worried about that, but you can still learn and do some interesting things. And then day one, July 1 of first year of residency, I mean, it's not, there's no hand holding. You're like, not only are you being thrown into the deep end, I mean, you're being thrown into the deep end, with cinder blocks attached to your legs. So
and you walk in the room and they say, "Hi, doctor," and you say,
and you're like, who? Right. And then, so really, I mean, it is like a very real, it becomes very real. You can put orders into the system. You're putting the medication that you are ordering. Like, geez, 2 days ago, I was a medical student. Now I'm putting an order in, and this medication is actually going into the patient. Like, I can harm this patient. And it's a very real feeling. Now, at least with my program and Athena's, I would imagine is similar because I feel like most residency programs, regardless of specialty, are like this. Really, your first year is you're really learning the basics. You're learning to walk. You're doing a lot of the notes. You're pre-rounding on the patients before the senior residents round on the patients, before you do big rounds on the patients. Those are the heaviest hours are during that first year. You do also have to study for boards during your first year. If you're a DO, Complex Level 3, if you're an MD, USMLE Step 3. And then moving into second year, you become, at least in our program, you're termed a senior resident as a second year. And you start to put the pieces of the puzzle start to come together, although they're not totally together yet. You start teaching the first year residents, you start working with the medical students, you have more autonomy, you're overseeing, your attendings start to trust you more. And then moving into third year, which is the final year, at least in a primary care residency, it's really, at least for me, it's about fine tuning my skills, my ability to interact with different types of patients, my ability to identify specific pathologies that might be more complex. Your expectations that are placed upon you by attending physicians are higher because you're about to be on your own less than a year later. And then on top of it, you're overseeing your second year residents and overseeing your first year residents. And then if you do have medical students, they're overseeing them as well. So it's almost like first year is very uniquely challenging and stressful because you don't know what's going on. But the responsibilities tend to grow as you tend to go through it. At least for me, first year was the most stressful, but I've become busier as I've gotten through the 3 years of residency. Athena, let's see what her experience is like.
I agree with everything you said. I can't speak to being a third year resident, but I think the thing for me was obviously walking in the room and being called doctor. I feel like shakes most people the very first time that it happens to you. But when you think about like your fourth year, you have all of this anticipation and build up and anxiety and stress about what's going to happen with match. Where am I going to go? And then you finish match and you have a couple of months potentially, or even maybe the couple of months before match where you're kind of on like study rotations or research rotations. And so you're really, your last semester of med school is like very laid back in many circumstances. And then you start residency and you are working a job and you're expected to show up to that job and you're expected to do well in that job. And so I think that it can be a shock to a lot of people's systems when they go from fourth year of medical school after match to all of a sudden I'm the doctor and I'm responsible for people's well-being. I remember, I think it was my first week ever of residency, I saw a patient in the clinic and I don't remember if I started them on birth control or I started them on iron. It was something very benign. And I like went home. It was probably 2 days later after this had happened, after my clinic day. So my clinic day was on a Monday. It was Wednesday and 11 p.m. at night, I texted my chief resident. I was like, what if I killed that patient? And she's like, well, what'd you do? I was like, well, I prescribed them iron or birth control. And she's like, now explain to me why you think. And I was like, well, I don't know, but what is like, it was the first medicine that I had given somebody. And so I think that it takes time when you initially start residency and you transition from being a medical student to, oh man, I put in that order and yeah, somebody co-signed it, but I'm the one that was responsible for putting in that order. Once you kind of get over that hump and you're kind of catching your breath and you're like, okay, I know that I'm putting in orders now, I know kind of what I'm doing. You're like, oh man, level 3 is just around the corner. And that's true regardless of what specialty you do. So then you start board studying and hit the books and you're stressed about that. Once I took level 3, the rest of first year, I was like, man, this doctoring thing is pretty cool. Like I'm really enjoying my first year of residency. Pass level 3 and then you get your license. And that comes with a whole other level of stress, I felt like, because in my program, once you're a second year resident and you're licensed and you're signed off by our ER director, you can start moonlighting. And so moonlighting is something that I do here in my program. And so it has been an exceptional experience for me as a second year, but it kind of took me back to that first day of residency where it's like, oh man, I just put in an order for amoxicillin and is that the right call? I don't know. And now I don't have an attending that's co-signing after me. And so I think that every step of the journey, so you go from from medical school to residency, now you're putting in orders, and that's a little bit nerve-wracking. Then you go from putting in orders with the co-signature to putting in your own orders. That's pretty nerve-wracking. Then you go from, okay, well, I've been moonlighting, but now I'm an attending on my own, and there's no safety net, really, would be my anticipation of what it's going to be going from being a third year to an attending in practice. And so I think you just kind of have to be along for the journey and recognize that every new hurdle that you kind of pass, or every new milestone that you pass, you're going to have that anxiety, and it's all going to be a different experience. And I think it's difficult to say, like, just because I love the end of my first year of residency, that doesn't mean it's not going to be the most stressful time of somebody else's residency. So take it all with a grain of salt, but try to enjoy the ride as you go along.
That's a really good answer. Thanks for sharing that. To add on to this discussion, how have your interactions been with your fellow residents, and what are some of the qualities you seek to work with in your fellow residents at your respective hospitals?
So I love my co-residents. We're just a class of 4. Our program's expanded, so we have 6 interns this year. I think that we're taking 6 for the next year. We're accredited to take up to 8, but my 3 co-residents are phenomenal. We have some non-traditional residents in our program. So one of my co-residents started his intern year. He's either 47 or 48 when he started. And so that's been kind of interesting. We share the same clinic day. And so he'll show up to clinic, and he's kind of taken almost like a fatherly role to the other residents in the clinic, where he brings us like snacks every day. And so we have a really good relationship there. Just talking about like shared interests and stuff, even though we have very different stories of how we got to med school. We have our family dinner that I told you about. One of my co-residents had a baby right before starting residency, and so we've kind of gotten to watch him grow up. We've met several of the spouses. One of the residents in our program came from an Iowa program. He's the only resident that came to our program from out of state, and so he and his wife moved here. Kind of like sight unseen. They had never been to Tahlequah, and they heard about our program and decided that they really liked kind of what we had to offer. And so they came out here. And so I've become very good friends with the resident's wife. And so we try to go out and do lunch. And I just feel like the interactions that I've had personally have all been very positive. And I've been very fortunate, knock on wood, that I haven't really had any negative experiences working with coworkers. As far as what we look for in residents, I think one of the first and foremost things is, can you get along well? Can you do the work that you need to do? And are you going to cause like a disruption in the kind of community that we built here? And so if you're somebody who is scoring an 800 on your COMLEX, but you're going to come out to the program and, bring a toxic energy, or think that you're better than everybody, or think that you don't have to try as hard because of your scores, then we don't want you regardless of what you scored. And so I think it's important that you find a balance before you get to residency of how can I make sure that I'm balancing my personal life and the relationships that I form with others with my academic life, and making sure that I learn what I need to learn and do well academically as well.
I was wondering, based on some of the things you said before, when I got to med school the first day, I immediately felt almost like out of place, like imposter syndrome hit really hard. It was like, all these people have it going on so perfect, and what am I doing here? It goes away. It doesn't really go away, but you don't feel that way as much as you get to know everyone, and you realize that they're freaking out too. But how did that continue through residency, or did it, and is it still there from time to time from you guys, if you guys have progressed through your careers?
Certainly for me in medical school, especially in the beginning, I felt very out of place, having no science background whatsoever. And the gunners sitting next to me in immunology. Like, I remember lecture one day, professor, my class, we had immunology during first semester because they were redoing the gross anatomy lab, and she's talking about light chains and heavy chains and kappa and whatever other Greek letter. Well, speaking of Greek letters, we're living in Greek letter time right now with COVID. But I go to the guy next to me. I'm like, do you know what she's talking about right now? Because I was like, this is complete foreign language to me. And he's like, yeah, you don't get this, So yeah, he pulled a gunner move. Ended up being a very nice guy who I got along with. But like, it would be like moments like that where I would feel out of place, or like in histology, for example, like when the professor would call out, all right, what do you see under the microscope, you know? And people would be like, oh, columnar epithelial, squamous, whatever. And then I'm just like looking and I'm like, oh, all I see is purple and pink. Like, I don't know, right? Like, I remember one of them maybe looked like a soccer ball. I can't even remember what that was. But it was, so I very much felt like I just like was a fish out of water. I'm not a real med student. I'm not legit, and I don't have the imposter syndrome. Now that said, Athena made a very very important comment earlier in saying the experience is different for everybody. So when it comes to residency, what I have found is that everybody has a very unique experience, even if you're in the same program. For me, residency is challenging in terms of I'm very motivated and I work hard and I want to do right by my patients and I want to learn, but I'm not like stressed out, freaking out about a test. I'm actually enjoying the process. And I feel like I'm doing okay at it. So I have a little bit less of that imposter syndrome. But I do have friends who are not just in my program, but like in programs around the country in different specialties who I keep in close touch with, and they constantly mention imposter syndrome. So it's not something that I personally experience, but it's something that is very, very, very common. Athena may have her own anecdotes about that.
Yeah, I think imposter syndrome isn't something that like you overcome and then it never comes back. I think that you can overcome imposter syndrome and you feel like you were on top of the world, you were doing excellent for your patients, you were making the right decisions. And then Tuesday hits and all of a sudden you're like, man, do I pick Invokana or saxagliptin? I don't know. And you get hung up on things and then you question every decision that you make for the rest of that day. Because it kind of comes in these waves, I think that it's important to surround yourself with people that you can talk to about it. And for some people, that's just their co-residents. And for other people, it's people from med school or it's their family. And so for me, I have probably 3 or 4 really good friends from med school that are all in different programs that are not here in Tahlequah. And we all have very different stories about what we ended up doing after med school. One of them is not in residency currently. One of them is doing internal medicine. I mean, we're all kind of in different spaces. And despite us being in different spaces, it's kind of nice that we can just text each other whenever it may be. I think I texted somebody today while I was in clinic and just said, hey, I need to check in and kind of share what you're experiencing and let somebody talk you off the ledge and say, okay, from an outsider's perspective, this is what I feel like I'm seeing from your situation or from what you're describing. And then within my program, I have one co-resident that probably I drove nuts my entire first year because it would be every couple of months and I would pop my head in at 5 o'clock, 5:30 after clinic and say, hey, let's talk for a second. He'd be like, okay, what's going on? I'd be like, I don't know what I'm doing about anything. I have no idea what's going on. And he'd be like, what do you mean? And I'd be like, well, you know that lecture that we had about interstitial lung disease? Did you get that? And he'd be like, no, not even a little bit. So it was just really nice to check in with somebody. And honestly, we would have had no idea that we were the only ones feeling that way had we not talked about it. And so that's why I think the family dinners that we do, I do something else, I don't know, call it whatever you want to call it. But I think getting together once a month outside of work and talking about what is stressing you out at work or in life, because y'all are kind of going to go through different life things at the same time as well. Right now it's the pandemic. I think it makes you feel less alone through the journey to talk to somebody else. And I think if you are not even confident enough, if you are brave enough to bring up that you feel inadequate in some area or you feel like you are lacking somewhere, you'll be surprised at how often just voicing that will result in helping you overcome it.
That's really cool also because I feel like when you meet with your co-residents and people you work with outside, then it builds that camaraderie. And then when you go back into work, the chemistry is just, a lot better and there's, a lot more progression of that. So that's actually really cool and refreshing to hear from both of you, that there's ways to get around this and you both are so successful yet, you still went through this process. So that's really nice to hear.
And I would say like for med students like applying, it's different now because most things, interviews are happening through Zoom.
Yeah.
So at least for me, I was able to fly places for interviews, and to Raj's point, it's for me, what I was looking at was how the residents were interacting with one another. Did they seem like a cohesive unit? I think that's something very important. Now that's harder to feel out, I think, in the post-pandemic world while you're doing a Zoom interview. But do your best. My advice to med students would be to really do your best if you get chances for Q&A, to see like how Athena's talking about her dinners with her group. Do they do wellness activities? Do you guys just randomly plan dinners together, or go out to happy hour ever? Have a beach day if you're living in Florida, or whatever it is. Things like that, I think would be very important both for you guys and your classmates and really any other med students who are listening.
And Dr. Singer, for you as well, the same question: how have your interactions been with your co-residents, and being a chief resident, how has your perspective changed in terms of your interactions with them, and what are some of those qualities that you think
Sure.
Are good?
Yeah, so like Athena, I've been fortunate. So my program is 5 residents in each class, 15 total. My class was the last class before the DO-MD merger, the AOA ACGME merger. So my class matched into our program through the AOA match. 4 out of the 5 of my residency classmates were my med school classmates, 2 of whom I've known since the first week of M1 year. So very cool to have that friendship already in place before coming in, and then meeting our 5th classmate who went to Campbell University, and she just fit right in. So we, as a class, the 5 of us, we would get together constantly, rely upon one another, vent to one another, and this senior resident is just, whatever it is, you have somebody you can turn to. And that for me was very important. And then as my class continued to climb up at taking on more leadership responsibilities within the program, we wanted to shape the program in a way that we thought would really benefit both patients as well as the health of the program. So we were, like Athena was talking about, always looking for people who are very teachable, humble, willing to learn, be team players. Because, yeah, believe it or not, even in FM, we have applicants who score close to 800 on the complex. So, that we're not always looking for the academic gunner. We're looking for the person. With regards to responsibilities as a chief resident, I'm one of 3 in my program. It's probably a good thing for the sake of the program that of the chief residents, my role is the most narrow of the 3. We have a didactics chief. She's actually been a chief resident for 2 years. She was a second-year chief too. She does a wonderful job putting together lectures, getting guest speakers, etc. We have a scheduling chief who puts together the schedule for all 15 residents. When I put together a schedule for anything, like I make like 19 errors like in a 2-week span. So my role narrowly is I'm the chief resident for on-call resident services as well as long-term patient care, which is essentially our nursing home. So for me, it's really narrow. I'm able to focus in on that, which is really nice. And then as a chief resident, and really it's all the 3rd-year residents, to be honest with you, we are sort of tasked in essentially conflict resolution if stuff's happening between the junior residents, or if there's a conflict between an attending. And these things seldom happen, but they do happen between an attending and a resident, or a medical student and a resident, etc. So there is a lot of oversight on that part. There is a lot of responsibility on that part, but I've always thrived and enjoyed leadership roles. I like to be relied upon. It does energize me. So yeah, that's the chief resident experience in a nutshell.
That's really cool. And speaking of teamwork with residency, what are some good ways? And this question is for both of you. What are some good ways to be a good teammate and be a good co-resident while also standing out to your attending, so that you're not stepping on anyone's toes, but you're also being productive as a student?
The biggest thing that I think that all residents should do that is not the culture of residents in general is I think there's this concept of, okay, first year is really, really tough, and you work these long hours, and you work the shifts that nobody wants to work, or the holidays that nobody wants to work. And then when you're a second year, you put in your time. And so you don't have to worry about it anymore. And I think that having that mentality coming into residency of I put in my time, so now it's your turn, can be really problematic for your co-residents, for the culture of your program. Yes, you did put in your time, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't suck for the person that's coming after you. And so I think acknowledging that that person is going through an experience that you did not enjoy is the first step, and offering to help when you can. So every time that I've been on internal medicine as a senior, in second year, when I had an intern on, they take 3 nights of call. We take 1 night of call a week. I always offer on the nights that I'm not on call, hey, if something comes up, give me a call and I'm happy to come in. I'm happy to help you with it, because I'm still in town and I had to work the day, so why not? And I'll tell you that as a senior, every time that I've offered that, I've never actually been called in. But I think just offering and being available really changes the way that people look at the work that they're having to do. Hey, somebody else is willing to help me out. Do I really need their help? No, I can manage this on my own. Whereas when you have this culture of, okay, peace, it's 5 o'clock, I'm heading out, enjoy your time, I did my time, it really makes it feel like, okay, I'm trapped here, and what am I supposed to do? And I think it builds confidence in the co-residents that you're working with, and it helps your coworkers be better, and it helps just the overall the morale of the program. And so that's the biggest piece of advice I have for being a good co-resident. And as an intern, the other thing that I would say is I came into residency with this mentality of, okay, I'm the intern, so I gotta figure out how to walk before I run. So if there are 10 patients, then I'll probably take 4, she'll probably take 6 as my senior, like this will be good. And then it's very much not the case. Typically, at least in my program, the experience was the intern took the most patients because they had the most to learn. And so when it started out, it was this, oh my gosh, what is going on? I cannot manage this patient load. But I think going in as an intern, or going in as a lower class resident, and realizing that you do have more to learn, and looking at it as an experience, and you have a senior, or you have an attending that's there to help catch you if you need help, or to ask for help if you need help. Trying to make it a positive experience rather than, oh man, I'm the intern, so I'm stuck with these extra call shifts, or I'm stuck with having these extra patients on my load.
Ditto to everything Athena said.
It's a good answer. It's a really good answer. Thank you.
Yep. So a question that I like to ask is, do you guys have any challenges or failures that you've had to overcome, and maybe that you learned something from? And what did you learn from them, and how did you overcome them? Anything that you would like to share? We can start with you, Dr. Singer.
Yeah, so I mean, I've already talked about it, I feel like, a bunch of times, but really those first 2 years of medical school were very challenging. My first year, I was not an academic stalwart by any stretch of the imagination. Like I remember the microbiology 2 class. I remember taking that final, and this was probably like our 6th final in a 4-day span. And I remember in the middle of the exam, like I'm already like, I haven't slept in however many days, and in my mind, I waved the white flag. I'm like, all right, I failed this course, probably failed it. And then by the good graces of whatever supernatural force was looking over me, there was a massive curve applied at the end, and I barely passed the class. I did better my second year, but for me, the real triumph came, and I knew it would. So even through the dark times, I had a feeling that I would do well once I got to the 3rd to M3 year, and I was going to be able to interact in the hospital, and seeing those gunners is the term I used before, who really were ruthless as 1st and 2nd year medical students. I don't want to say I reveled in their difficulties, but seeing how well I know I did based on the feedback I got as a 3rd year really felt like, for me, it was proof positive that I was meant for this. Especially when I could see these people who were getting straight A pluses and the top board scores, and they were getting destroyed on their evals M3 year. And then ultimately, really what it comes down to is happiness, right? So I do know people who chose to go into specific specialties because they got the board scores, or they wanted the clout of saying, hey, I'm in this specialty, etc. And now they're in that residency and they're miserable. So, for me, I've had these arguably, besides college, which was awesome, this has arguably been the best 3 years of my life. I've loved residency. So for me, the triumph is my happiness. After overcoming so much difficulty, so many tears shed during the first 2 years of medical school, and now getting to this point where now I'm on the back nine of my third year of residency. I'm going to be out on my own real soon. So for me, that I would say is the triumph for me in the end.
I'm going to echo I agree with the sentiment of what you're saying, but what you said kind of reminded me of, I told you I have 4 really good friends from med school that I still stay in contact with. And one of them likes to talk to med students. So he goes and does presentations to med students all the time, or even to undergrad. And one of the things that he always says is everybody will tell you how hard medical school is. Everybody will tell you how hard residency is, but people tend to leave out how much fun you're going to have and how many really close friends that you're going to make and the memories that you're going to share together during those times. And so I think that, yes, residency is really hard, but I wouldn't change where I'm at. And obviously we still have time to enjoy our lives. And I think that's important that you kind of build that in and do things like sharing an afternoon with a podcast, or with Dr. Singer and I spending some time with the resident council, finding whatever it is that's going to help you see the light at the end of the tunnel to what you're doing, because there are going to be tough days. And so you have to set yourself up for success by giving yourself an outlet outside of that too. That's
really cool. Thanks for sharing that with us. One more question for me personally. Where do you both see yourself in 5 years? 5 years, sorry.
So my contract with my future employer isn't totally finalized, but the terms are it's going to actually be a 5-year contract. So presumably I'll still be where I'm at. No, but I do see myself, I will be in the outpatient setting, doing primary care in South Florida, in the Tri-County area, so in a major city. Hopefully building some great relationships with my patients. Hopefully still having one foot in the door at NSU and doing a little teaching. And really just continuing to grow as a physician. Not expecting to be this, big time doctor or anything. For me, the joy is when I see a last name on my patient census that looks familiar to me, and I'm like, I wonder who that is. And they come in, and I realize it's the wife or the sister of one of my patients who's already seen, who they felt enough trust in me that they want their family members to see me. So for me, I hope to have a practice that's going to be really grounded in that type of sentiment and emotion. And that's where I think you guys will be seeing me in 5 years.
I'm going to say kind of a similar thing. I love outpatient medicine. I've never had an interest really in doing inpatient medicine. It was kind of the one rotation that I was like, I could do without doing that. But I would love to be in a clinic setting. I still really love pediatrics. I really love women's health. So doing some preventative women's health stuff. I'm very passionate about that. Some advocacy for that patient population. And then I really love it in Tahlequah, so we'll see as far as where I end up, but having the opportunity to either stay here or stay involved with the medical students in the med school would be fantastic. And then of course with ACOFP as well. And so I have another year to continue to be involved as a resident, and then potentially see where things go within the organization for that, because kind of like I talked about, advocacy is something that's really important to me. And I believe that, as residents or even as medical students, you have to be aware of the things going on in the world that impact both yourself and your future profession and your patients. And you can't gripe about those things if you're not willing to step up to the plate and help make them better. And so I do think that we have a responsibility as physicians to be community leaders and to be the ones that step up to make that change. So hopefully you'll see me making some changes.
That's exciting. I don't have any more questions. Do you, Raj?
Nope, I don't have any more questions. Thank you both so much for joining us. We had a wonderful time and we learned so much from you. So thank you.
Thank you for having us. It's really neat. You guys both do a great job with the podcast, and I hope for great success for both of you guys, both with matching into the specialty of your choice. No pressure for FM or to anybody who's listening.
It is the right decision.
But yeah, you can't go wrong with that. And yeah, just all the success and best wishes to you both.
Good luck, you guys.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And once again, thanks for joining us on the Medical Muse. You guys, as all of our guests are, very inspiring to us, and we appreciate your time.
The Medical Muse is produced by Timothy Crowe. Your hosts are Daniel Epstein and Raj Kavadi. Social media coordinator, Anja von der Osten. Music on the show by Foxy Music. For more information, check out foxymusic.com. Join us next episode for our interview with Dr. Shane Williams, where we discuss mentorship in medicine, what it means to find a calling, teaching, and dive into the world of NFTs. Lastly, we'd love to connect with you. Follow us on Instagram at @the_medical_muse. See you next time.